Welcome. My name is Mark Carafa. I'm the Director of Business Development and Physician Recruitment at the Medical Center, and I was asked to introduce our guests this evening. First of all, on behalf of the Los Alamos Council on Cancer, I'd like to welcome you all. In addition to them, the folks from Mesa Public Library, and of course our friends here at the First Baptist Church, and our lovely pink ladies, as we call them at the hospital, are actively involved in making this all come together, and I really appreciate their efforts to make this happen. I've had the privilege of knowing Robert as a friend now for a couple of years, and when he told me his story, it was so moving and so compelling to see how something as dark and dangerous as cancer can be, first of all, overcome, but second of all, be turned into a ministry, if you will. I had a couple comments I wanted to read, and I apologize for reading to you, but I wanted to get these quotes right. I broke out my book of Bartlett's famous quotations last night. Some of you know what that is, and there were a couple quotes that struck me about creativity. One was by the British author G.K. Chesterton, and he wrote, "Something created is loved before it ever exists." Then there's a gentleman named Claude Bernard, who is a French physiologist, and he was asked once how to define life, and he said, if I had to define life in one word, it would be creation. We've all experienced creativity in various different ways, whether we were finger painting as children or drawing on the walls of our bedrooms, much to our parents' delight. But it's something that if we don't really develop and delve into and trust, we oftentimes could miss our gift. Well, Rebecca and Robert Bluestone did not miss their gift. They both knew about loving something before it existed, and they know a lot about life. Individually, they are nationally renowned artists in their own right, but as they went through this experience, they were able to combine their love for stringed instruments, as they both play, to turn this into something very special. They have performed and presented to folks across this country, from the Mayo Clinic to the First Baptist Church of Los Alamos. So on behalf of Los Alamos Council on Cancer, please give a warm welcome to Rebecca and Robert Bluestone.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, Robert and I are going to share some of our things that we've discovered about creativity through some very personal experience of ours. We're going to start this evening with a video that kind of introduces some of the work that we do around the country, making this connection between creativity and our everyday lives.
In 2001, Rebecca was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. That was, in Spanish we call it a choque. It was a real shot. It was a hard thing for me to handle the idea that my wife was sick and there was nothing I could do. We never know from moment to moment what life has for us. But we were very fortunate because it was stage 1. It wasn't stage 3. Stage 3 survival rates haven't changed in 35 years for ovarian cancer. So we started working with cancer survivor groups, cancer support groups, but then we quickly realized that what we had learned was very applicable to anyone who was going through a major illness in a hospital.
The most profound things that happen to us, either in joy or pain, we rarely have the words to express the depth of what we feel. But that's what art does. We can go into a room where someone we don't know, who doesn't even speak the same language that we do, and communicate through and music.
You keep it smooth and keep the edges straight, you put it exactly the same amount of
guitars. That's okay. That's okay. I played steel string. I played a lot of electric guitar.
Those are basically the same techniques that I use. I just do it on a loop, and you'll get to see what that looks like. So these are, but we live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Robert and I both make our living as artists, and have done that for a long time. We've been together for almost 25 years. I do hand-dyed, hand-woven progressions. This is one of the more magical ones. It's a mathematician in the 11th century in Italy discovered that.
Yeah,
If you take one,
I feel fortunate to have something I love to do so much. Yeah.
My goodness, what a privilege. Beautiful.
Look at that. Dogs are wonderful.
This is Suki Suki.
Her work can be seen around the world from the U.S. Embassy in Quito, El Salvador, to the Chicago Art Institute and the private collection of Robert Redford. Ooh, can we talk?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little Robert Redford story.
Good.
You have to learn it, like a language, something like that. The right side of our brain, however, is the intuitive, creative side. That's where creativity comes from. And that's how...
Remember what I said, no smiling.
Come on, you can give us a smile. You're enjoying the music, right?
Okay, it's a spring day, right? Better perhaps the plug.
And, that people are body, mind, and spirit. If just treating the body isn't enough. We have to kind of address those. And I think of what's going to happen with my hair and what's it going to feel. Well, thank you so much. Oh, you're quite welcome. Take care.
Thank you very much. Y'all take care. Enjoy it.
Very pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure is all mine. Art is the expression of the experience of being human. There are no other collaborations between a fiber artist and a guitarist. So we saw these connections, these aesthetic connections to what we do, and we also had this idea of how could we get folks in communities to understand that creativity is not just the province of artists. Creativity is within us all.
So out of Robert and I being able to explore as artists, I'm a visual artist. I do hand-dyed, hand-woven silk tapestries. Robert obviously is a tuba player. Oh, I'm sorry, guitar. We've only... Oh, a bassoon. We began to realize that creativity was larger than just what artists do when they go into their studio. And this particular presentation came out of using creativity in very challenging situations. Myself caring for my mother, who died of breast cancer when she was 54, and I was able to spend the last 6 weeks of her life with her. And then my own diagnosis of cancer, of ovarian cancer, and Robert taking care of me. That we realized we relied on a lot of these things that we had learned, and started doing this presentation called A State of Grace. We've been together, so if you see us disagreeing on things up here or anything tonight, we've been together for about 25 years. And when Robert and I initially got together, we realized we had a lot in common because we were both artists. But we didn't realize we had all these other things in common. And I guess in the early 90s, we started collaborating, doing a collaboration called Woven Harmony, where we bring the two things together. And we very quickly realized that woven harmony had become a metaphor for this idea of making connections between things where it seems like there is no connection. We had lived together for a long time, had looked at what each other had done, but we didn't see some of the things that we're going to talk to you about tonight. They were all there all the time. And what we realize is that that happens in life also. That it's very easy for us to see all the ways that we're disconnected. But when we can find those connections, that's when life gets really interesting and when we can really support each other and grow. I apologize. I thought I had, you'll see some pictures of my work. I thought I had a slide of my work in here sooner. But I do all my own dyeing. And so one of the things that Robert and I have in common is that we both use our art forms as a way of speaking about those things that we don't have words for. So I start with just white silks and about 10 or 12 different dyes. And from those 10 or 12 different dyes, by measuring them very precisely, it's literally unlimited, the number of color combinations that I can do. And color is its own language. I know there's one weaver in the crowd tonight. Any other weavers here tonight? A reluctant weaver? But color speaks. And so I use color as a way to get to those aspects of human experience. After all, I think that the most profound things that happen to us, we can't often put into words. And so when we have these other ways of accessing that part of ourselves, we can use our whole self. And Robert, obviously, music becomes a language in itself. The other thing that we realized that we had been there all the time was the similarity in our instruments. This is what my work is created on, the loom. And we've been looking at both these things, but not seeing the connections. They're both these tightly strung, handmade wooden instruments. And we create our work and communicate by the subtle interaction of our fingers with strings. actually a piece of music that was written for Robert and I, part of a suite called the Woven Harmony Suite. We collaborated with a composer. We wanted a piece of music, not that just that Robert could play, but music that kind of captured the essence of the work that we were trying to do, and that's a really beautiful movement from that. So I grew up in rural Oklahoma, but in 1984 I was living on the East Coast and I learned how to weave. And I came out to Santa Fe in 1986 to take a Navajo weaving class. And during that week and a half that I was here, one of the women in class invited me over to her house for dinner. And there was a man there named Robert Bluestone. I never left Santa Fe. It turned out that the woman teaching the class was not Navajo. She was a very famous Hopi weaver named Ramona Sakiestewa, who still lives in Santa Fe. I wound up being one of two of the people that got to work in Ramona's studio over a period of 10 years. And I started my career as an artist in Santa Fe. So I highly recommend going to Santa Fe and taking a weaving class. Out of that one class, I got a husband, a teacher, and started a career.
It was an interesting thing, how this all evolved. Rebecca and I had been doing all of this touring for a lot of years, going all over the country. Then Rebecca got sick. And it was an interesting juxtaposition because she got sick in the spring of 2001. And we had a lot of dates that fall. But that fall, she had already had surgery. She started chemotherapy. And we didn't realize it, but we had already learned very, very important lessons from this process that we were going through. There were people after 9/11 saying, the world's over, everything is going to be different now. And because we had gone through this kind of personal maelstrom, it's one of those words. You get the idea. It was bad. We were able to kind of be there for folks and say, now, let's have a little bit of a sense of perspective about this. What happened was terrible, but there are other things to consider in the larger scheme of things. And I will never forget, probably Rebecca's second chemotherapy. At that point, she was beautiful and bald. And we were sitting out in the garden under this big apricot tree, and Rebecca said, when I get better, and my heart soared at that moment, when I get better, we have to take what we've learned and take that out and share that with people. And you know for yourselves, there is a hard-won wisdom that comes with dealing with a major disease like cancer. You get to have to, you don't have a choice, go up a very steep learning curve. All the time there's this ringing in your head. You're trying to concentrate on what the doctor is saying, and you're in the lizard part of your brain trying to understand stuff. And that's a hard place to understand stuff in. So we learned some lessons from this, and we decided to take them out on the road. And we worked outward in concentric circles from cancer groups, cancer support groups, cancer institutes, to working with everyone. We realized that anyone dealing with a major traumatic illness was going through a lot of the same kinds of things that we did. And so we wound up in all kinds of places, and we expanded vastly the repertoire of the things that we could do in terms of not just talking to folks, but I had been doing some playing in hospitals before, but that expanded greatly. Going into wards, going into chemo suites, going all over the hospitals. And we found out all kinds of stuff. And this next picture for me probably encapsulates what this experience has been, if there's kind of one place where I would point to. We were at Shands Hospital, which is the teaching hospital of the University of Florida. And we were in the chemo suite. And there was a woman there, and for me, the idea is, it's not that I played at Carnegie Hall, it's not who I studied with, it's nothing like that. My ego is checked at the door. It's about what the situation requires. Does somebody want to talk? Do they want to hear guitar music? Do they want me to make jokes? I have to be really sensitive to the human equation in the room. So this woman and I really hit it off. And this was her first chemo infusion. And I asked her, I said, so you're going home after this? And she said to me, well, I live in a tent. And the forecast in Gainesville was for 4 days of very heavy rain. Rain like we don't see around here. And I brought this up with the staff, the excellent staff there, who made sure that she had appropriate housing, because right after you have chemotherapy, you shouldn't be in a tent in a rainstorm. So that was really a good thing for us, to be able to just in a little way affect someone's life. Our travels took us, as Rebecca mentioned, to the Mayo Clinic. And not many people know this, but the Mayo brothers, Dr. Bill and Dr. Charlie, are still alive. Here they were at the dialysis unit to greet me. Now, they're pretty old. That's why they look so dried out. And they have wry Minnesotan senses of humor. But these guys were brilliant. There's a book I can recommend to all of you where they wrote this series of essays, both of them, about what a hospital needs to be. And basically what they got over 100 years ago is that hospitals are very scary places. And what you have to do in a hospital, according to Dr. Bill and Dr. Charlie, is make it humanized. There's a piano in every lobby in the Mayo. There's more artwork there in most museums. They have gone out of their way to make the hospital, to make the Mayo, this place that's warm and friendly. Because as you know, the Mayo is a place where you go. They say, well, we don't know what to do with this, so we'll send you to the Mayo. So they have done this, they did this remarkable thing over 100 years ago in understanding that hospitals are not just laboratories for people to be tested in a dry, desiccated place. It's really wonderful what they did. For me, working with some folks was in all kinds of units in hospitals was really an important thing. And I realized when I was asked in Florida, actually, had I ever worked with a burn unit, that my initial reaction was to go, whoa, am I ready for this? And as soon as I felt that way, I knew that I had to do it because I had to see what that was all about. And burn units are very, very interesting places to go and play at. Because for people in burn units, what's happened is their life up until that point where they had this thing happen to them is over. And they're going to start a new life. And they are in the most vulnerable, sensitive places you could possibly imagine. It's quite extraordinary. And so I went into this burn unit and I went bed to bed. And I spent time with people, kind of talking with them, seeing if they wanted me to play or if they wanted to be alone, if they wanted music, if they wanted to talk, what exactly they wanted, what exactly they needed. And after about 45 minutes, the charge nurse came literally charging into one of the spaces I was at and said, you know, ever since you got here, everybody's blood pressure has gone down 10 points. And when I told the ARDS presenter, the person at the University of Florida, that, he being a cancer survivor, he started to cry. It was quite an extraordinary experience for me. Now, this became a logical extension. I realized I had been doing a lot of this work, and we had been doing a lot of this work all over the country. But could I be doing that where I lived? And so I went to Christa St. Vincent's hospital down in Santa Fe, and believe it or not, they have a vice president for community and spirituality. That's pretty good. And if you're writing a bad book, you'd call the guy John Brothers, right? That's really his name. It's John Brothers. And I told John about what I'd been doing, and he said, well, after I've been here for a few months, he had just arrived from Houston, then we can talk about this. And I said, okay. I left the materials with him. And after a few months, I said to myself, wait a second, there's people in the hospital who need music right now. And so I went back, and there's a difference between being aggressive and assertive. I tried to stay on the assertive side of the line whenever I possibly can. And I said, John, let's get started. We need to get started. And let's see, this morning, whenever I'm not on tour, I try to get to the hospital as much as I possibly can. So this morning I was in the ER, I was in ICU, yesterday I was in rehab, the behavioral unit, pediatrics. I can get in any place in the hospital.
You need an extra hand.
I need an extra hand. And this is my badge. I'm legitimate over there.
So we've been talking about this idea of creativity. And unfortunately, what happens to a lot of us is if we're not artistic, we're made to feel like we're not creative, usually at a very early age. That actually happened to me. This is me and my little sister in Oklahoma going over the fence to the horses when we were growing up. And my side man here. And when I got into school in the first grade in the 50s, in a little art class, I was actually told that I didn't have any artistic talent because I couldn't do what they were asking us to do, which was to draw something that looked like something. I think they wanted us to draw a rabbit or something. And of course, there were some kids that could do that. I couldn't do that, and I actually didn't have any interest in doing that. And so I was never identified as being creative. And that happens to a lot of us. But we can't not be creative. We cannot access it. We cannot use it. But creativity is a part of our essential nature. We all have an imagination. There's a reason why we have that imagination. Being an artist is just one way to use creativity. All artists are creative, but not all creative people are artists. And so in that way, we can use creativity in every aspect of what we do. I always say that all creativity is that you see something that other people don't see, and you find a way to allow them to see it. That's what creativity is. So it might be playing a piece of music or creating a tapestry, or it might be something in your work situation or when you are caring for a family member and you see something that no one else sees. And it requires this kind of courage to be creative because the nature of that definition, you see something that other people don't see, and you have to find a way to allow them to see it, means that other people don't know what you're talking about until you show them. And that's our gift to each other. We all see things a little bit differently. And when we can express that in whatever way, I do it visually because I like to do public speaking, but I'm an introvert. So for me, that nonverbal world is much more easy for me to access. Robert is an extrovert. That verbal world is very easy for him to access. We all have these different skills. And life is so complex that we can't, each one of us, understand everything that's going on. And so when we can express or show other people these things that we see that they don't see, that's our gift. We all think that we're always looking at the same thing or hearing the same thing or seeing the same thing, but we actually all see it a little bit differently. These are the cliffs out around Abiquiu where George O'Keeffe lived and painted. And when we look at this photograph, we all think that we're seeing exactly the same thing, but we're actually all seeing something a little bit different. So when I look at this, what I see are the colors and shapes and textures. Probably none of the rest of you saw this. And so part of that being creative is identifying what it is that you see and having the courage to share that, even though other people maybe don't see it at the time. Now, this particular piece is in the collection of Robert Redford. He owns 8 of my pieces. And my Robert and I had the honor of getting to meet him a few years ago. He had seen an article about some of the work that Robert and I do in communities and had called up the gallery where he had bought my work in Santa Fe and asked if he could meet us because he's a very community-minded person. So I get this very surreal call from the gallery saying, Robert Redford would like to meet you, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah. And then I got off the phone, I was like, did that just happen? And so we set up a time for him to come over to the house. And he's also a collector of my teacher's work, and he had had dinner with her the night before. And I think that maybe in the course of their dinner, when he and Ramona were talking, he must have said, I'm going to go over and meet Rebecca tomorrow. I think she must have thought, had told him that he had already met me in her studio. Because when he came to the gate the next day, the whole morning I was like, I was really nervous. I thought, what am I going to say to Robert? You know, everyone hasn't said, and I didn't want to kind of do the goofy movie star stuff or anything. But I was saved from my nervousness because I opened the gate, and before I could say anything, I said, "Have we already met?" And I was like, "No." And I thought, "What's this about?" And then I thought, oh, Ramona must have told him that he'd met me, and because he was very distraught. And now he's embarrassed that he asked to meet me and didn't remember that he had met me. And I said, "No, we haven't met." And he said, "Are you sure?" At that point, my nervousness left me, and I looked at him. I said, "Trust me." And then he kind of, oh, yeah, maybe you wouldn't forget who I am. So he stayed with a couple of hours and visited with Robert and I. He's a wonderful person, doesn't talk about himself at all, talks about this vision that he has for the world of this kind of partnership between the environment and the arts and business. And for those of you who are interested, he is absolutely as good looking in real life as he is in the movies. And it's not easy to have a normal conversation with Robert Redford. And that's totally not true.
You learn a lot taking care of somebody who has gone through a life-threatening illness. I learned a lot taking care of Rebecca. And a lot of the things that I had to learn were counterintuitive, because I thought to myself, you know, what I've got to do is spend all of my time taking care of Rebecca. That's job number one. Everything else is secondary. And what I didn't realize initially was if I didn't have anything to give to Rebecca, then I wasn't going to be doing a good job of taking care of Rebecca. So intrinsically, I had to take good care of me in order to have something for her. And that was very illuminating for me. And that extrapolates to hospitals. You know what I see in hospitals? Is that caretakers don't take very good care of themselves. Already see heads nodding, you know. Nurses are really bad at taking care of themselves. At Christmas time, over at Christus in Santa Fe, I'd go into one of the nurses' rooms, their stations, and it looked like a diabetic ward there. I wanted to, you know, if they ate all of the sugar in there, they were going to go into insulin shock. I wanted to quarantine the room. So there was an incident that really pointed this out to us. A few years back, there was an infamous case of child abuse that actually happened in Florida that made the national press. And as a result of that, there was a lot of coverage on what happened to these adopted kids who were very, very badly mistreated. The Child Protective Services team at the university, at Shands Hospital, were the ones who were taking care of these kids. There were 8 of them. And we were asked to talk to the team. And we were told, there's 24 members of the team, it could be that 4 or 5 of them show up. And we said, that's fine. Whoever shows up is supposed to be there. So we went, and in fact, 20 of the 24 members were there, and they videoed it for the 4 members who couldn't make it. And walking into the room, all you had to do was, post-traumatic stress disorder. That's going on in this room. So for about half an hour, 45 minutes, we talked about what we had been doing. We, in effect, established our credentials, our bona fides, with these folks. And then, after we played, we talked, we showed our work, we said, is it time to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room? And they were open to it at that point. And we were able to thank them for the work that they did, for the quietly heroic work that they did, and ask them the question, if you hadn't taken care of the children, what would have happened to them? And you can see in the photo what they looked like afterwards. Now, I'm not saying we cured them, we didn't, but maybe we took one small step with them to own what they did and to help them on this road to recover from this very traumatic experience for them. So that got us thinking about, okay, we're working with patients, but what can we do with caretakers? What kind of stress is going on in hospitals? A very high level of stress is going on for staff in hospitals. And for me, one of the main jobs that I see for myself whenever I go into a hospital situation is, as much as I'm trying to do something for the patients, I'm trying to do something for the caretakers. I think that that's hugely important. And I would ask each of you here who is a caretaker to think about, it is counterintuitive, but you got to take care of yourself. And what that means is some really basic fundamental stuff. This is where you call out the cavalry. This is where you call your friends and you say, hey, what I'd like you to do is call me once or twice a week, leave a message on the phone if I don't pick up, and say, hey, I'm here for you, what do you need? And I can remember being non-specific about those kinds of things. And Rebecca had just had chemotherapy, and somebody brought over a pot of green chili stew. And I stopped it at the door. If they had walked in and Rebecca had smelt the green chili stew right after chemotherapy, she would have been sick for 2 days from that. So you can be very specific with people. People want to know what they can do for you. So come up with a plan that way, because they can do things just as ordinary as just give you some time off. Come over and take care for a few hours so you have a little break. Also, for caretakers, your main job is to protect that person who's sick from people who want to project their own fears on them. It's an energy exchange. And you have to be very, very aware of surrounding the person who's going through it with only people who are going to bring positive energy to the situation. So you work within that circle. And it's accessing what in Jungian terms is called the warrior archetype, which is not about fighting. It's about building walls. It's about setting up barriers, setting up gates. So for me, at the hospital in Santa Fe, I find myself with people like the rehab folks all the time. I find myself with the head of the Cancer Institute at the hospital. I find myself with the head doctor at the hospital, because I'm always asking, okay, what can we do for the staff? What can we do to boost the morale of the staff? Because if we take good care of the staff, we're going to take good care of the patients.
So Robert and my work is a lot about this idea of beauty, because beauty is something that feeds that creative spirit part of ourselves. It feeds our souls. But creativity is also about how do we have the same kind of equanimity when we have adversity. And one of the first places that I began to learn that was in my experience of caring for my mother. The greatest gift that she gave me in her life was to allow me to be there with her in that very intimate way in those last weeks of her life. A lot of people say that they want to protect their families from what's going on. But it's a huge gift to get to share any stage of life with our loved ones. And it also gave me that first glimpse of what unconditional love really means. She and I had had an extremely difficult relationship. But in that time together, the personality fell away, the differences, the past, the future, all of that fell away. And it was just two human beings with each other going through this process that ultimately, in some ways, became very joyful. It was an interesting kind of circle that we completed. I was born in the hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and she died in that same hospital, and we hadn't been together in that hospital again since I was born there. So it kind of completed this circle for us. knowing that my mother had cancer at an early age, a very aggressive kind that they weren't able to treat, didn't catch quickly enough, I still didn't think this was something that was going to happen to me. Because at that point in my life, I was 48 in 2001, and I thought I was actually in control of my life. I still had that hubris that if I did everything right, that nothing bad would happen to me if I took care of myself. And when I got my diagnosis of ovarian cancer, it was a huge shock to me. Because I was like, what is this about? And then I realized that we can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to what happens to us. Now, I didn't get to that place on the first day of my diagnosis, I can guarantee you that. I went through some really difficult times, and I started to get really depressed and feeling sorry for myself and thinking, why did this happen to me, and all the kinds of things that we go through. And then at a certain point, I was able to step back from it and observe what was going on just enough to kind of have the insight of, am I only okay when everything's going the way I want it to go? Is that the depth of my understanding of life? Is that what life is about? That I'm only okay when I think things are okay in life. And I thought that can't be, because that's not the nature of life. There are many difficulties in life. There's much joy, but right alongside that joy is great difficulty sometimes. And I began to realize that I could use my creativity in that experience by being in the moment. There's a wonderful saying that I love called, "Beyond the door named fear lies our greatest gift." That when we confront the things that scare us the most, we have the most to learn. And I realized that what was making me terribly unhappy was being too much in the future, worrying about what was going to happen. Worry, anxiety, stress, all of those kinds of things are indicators that we're living more in the future than in the moment. Or I was too much in the past. Why did this happen to me? Wanting things to go back to the way they were before. And when we're in that kind of regret, guilt, resentment, when we're feeling those kinds of things all the time, we're in the past. But what I realized was that when I was in the moment, as difficult as it was, I was okay. That in that moment, if I wasn't trying to go back to how things were in the past or worrying about how things were in the future, in that moment, I could handle it. And that all I had to do was handle it one moment at a time. And I also then began to realize that that's the nature of creativity. That in each moment, we have a choice, like in Mark's introduction. We have a choice to create that moment. What is that moment going to be? Is it going to be a constructive moment or a destructive? Destructive is, this is terrible, I can't do anything about this, the whole world's, that can just go on and on forever. All the bad things that we judge as bad. But it precludes possibility. That kind of view precludes possibility. There is no possibility in negativity. Or in that moment, we can choose what we say, what we do, what we think. We can't change necessarily what's happening to us. And I'm not even talking about positive thinking or anything. I actually found that didn't work. I had to really feel the depth of what was happening, and it was very painful. But in that pain, feeling that pain, we can make a constructive choice. What can I learn from this? How does this feel? How must other people feel when they're going through things like this, or maybe even things more difficult than this? And when I took that judgment out of whether it was good or bad and just experienced it as it was much easier. So in each moment, we have that choice to create what that moment is going to be. One of the easiest ways to be in the moment is to just watch your breath. To just step back and watch your breath going in and out through your body. When you're watching your breath, when you're aware of that breathing, because that's always there as long as we're alive, you're in the moment. And then we don't lose what gifts are given to us. When we're in the past or we're in the future, whatever's happening now becomes lost. And that breath is your life. That's life. All these other things that happen to us or that we do, our careers or what we look like, who we know, all that kind of stuff are just life situations. And life situations change and move and evolve, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're pleasant, sometimes they're highly unpleasant. But that essential life, that breath, the in and out of the breath is always there. That's who we are. That's our life. We always have that. And when we have that moment, then we have unlimited possibility. We can see possibility where it seems like there was no possibility. That's being truly creative. And one of the things that Robert and I have realized over the years of trying to make our living as creative artists, nothing that we do exists unless we create it. There is no job for a classical guitarist. There is no job for a tapestry weaver. As Robert said in the video, there is no collaboration of fiber and guitar. We just made it all up. I just make my pieces up. And for some reason, then people pay me thousands of dollars for it. But in order to access that, creativity is not something we think up. It's not a thinking process. It's something we access, where we go to that place where we know things that we don't know we know. In order to access that, we have to create an environment that puts us in that place. And on a daily basis, go to whatever it is for you that allows you to be in that more contemplative, unconscious space. For us, it's nature. I love to garden. And I grow flowers and vegetables, and Robert enjoys looking at the flowers and eating the vegetables.
I'm proud. All the work that I haven't done in the garden.
So a lot of our energy goes into creating this kind of sanctuary that allows us, that feeds us on a continuous basis. And so many times we make choices to not spend time with people that want to spend time with us, to not be out there in the world expending energy. Robert alluded to the thing. A very wise person told us one time that it's necessary to look at every situation in life as, is this an energy exchange or is this an energy drain? Because an energy drain, again, takes us nowhere. We have to have that energy exchange, especially when we're dealing with things that are affecting us physically. And so being able to identify on a regular basis what is an energy exchange in your life, with nature, with people. For us, we love our animals. We've got 3 little dogs, Mickey, Luke, and Buster. And we love hanging out with our dogs and being in our garden and spending time together or spending time alone in our studios. So where is that energy exchange? And how do you give yourself permission to say no to the energy drains? That was one of the things that I came away with. I found that I was constitutionally incapable anymore of doing things that were draining my energy. I simply can't do it anymore. I can't do it. And some people don't understand. And it's not even necessarily like that there's something wrong with those situations. It's just that you know when your energy's being drained off and when you're having an energy exchange. Because in that energy exchange, we can maintain the vital energy no matter what's going on in our bodies, in our families, in the people we love, people we care about. No matter what's going on, we can maintain that sense of wonder and awe and joy in every moment. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, we're in a church, and so there's a couple of things that I would like to talk about. There was a Christian philosopher in the 6th century named Boethius, who said something that changed my life very early on. He said that the purpose of music is to make the soul susceptible to divine influence. As soon as I heard that, and the odd thing is, are you familiar with the avant-garde composer from the 20th century named John Cage? John Cage told me that in a conversation, one-on-one conversation. It's very strange. But when he said that, all of a sudden, a whole bunch of things fell into place. Also, this idea of creativity, a lot of you are saying, well, you know, I'm an engineer, the optimist says the glass is half full, the pessimist says the glass is half empty, the engineer says the glass is twice as big as it needs to be. You know, people think, oh, engineer. No. Within each of us is this force, this life force. The Chinese call it qi. In the Christian tradition, it's called Emmanuel. It literally means the God within. So when we're talking about this thing, this what seems like an abstract concept of you're creative and you've been thinking your whole life you're not, it's there. And what Rebecca said about that word of accessing it, you can access it. And you have to think of it like a muscle. The more you access it and the more you expand your definition around it, it's not just boy plays guitar, a beautiful woman makes beautiful pieces. That's not it. It's about you're a parent and you come up with a really good solution for one of your children, okay, to kind of get ahead. That's something. You're an accountant and you see a new way to kind of balance books. Make it sure it's legal. Be cool.
Yeah, careful with the creative accounting.
Yeah, creative, yeah, you don't want to go, yeah. There's so many ways that we can find to build community, build ourselves through this idea of creativity. And we've worked with the Federal Reserve Bank, the 10th District, which we're part of here in northern New Mexico. And when we spoke to the bankers, when we did a keynote and had a very surreal dinner with Ben Bernanke, and said that creativity is the currency of the 21st century, they got it immediately. They understood exactly what we were talking about. And so the challenge for each of you is to say, okay, where is this strong place in me? Where does my soul reside? Where is this creative element in me? Because I assure you, it's all there. It's there for you. It's just a matter of you taking the time to inquire within and find it.
Do you want to take questions now? Or
We
do you want to play?
can do that. Either. Let's take some questions and I can play a piece.
Okay. So does anybody have any questions about anything that Robert and I have talked about tonight, or you want us to expand on anything? Or
For me, the answer is to go I read someplace that in the face of great ugliness, the best response is beauty. And for me, what I just try to do is give people a brief respite from what they're going through. And what I would say for the word matrix literally means from a mother. It's that web around a mother. Cancer is a disease that affects the whole family. Everybody gets it. Everybody gets it. So the more that you can connect up with folks within that matrix, the better it's going to be, and for everybody. And I don't, Rebecca and I talk about it. Maybe this isn't the place to talk about this concept of death, because we don't, Rebecca would say that we don't intellectually understand death. I mean, what is death all about? But death isn't the opposite of life. Death is the opposite of birth. And the Greeks said, we never know what destiny has in store for us. We never know. We never know from one day, from 1 minute to the next. We think we know, and then all of a sudden you get sick, or you see somebody vulnerable, like a child gets sick, and nothing breaks your heart more. Being in pediatrics the other day, you know, I see it. I see what's going on. And what I do is, as the Australians say, go to the boffins, go to the experts on that. Go to the people with heart with that. And what I would look at myself, the direction that I would pursue with that is the medicine. Forgive me for being an optimist here, but what I'm seeing in hospitals all across the country is a return to what I would call the medical arts. Medicine as an art form. A doctor or a nurse coming into a room and subsuming all those things that they learned in school and kind of, okay, what do I need to do here? Accessing that creative part of themselves. And with kids, to get them through something like that, I can't imagine anything harder. I can't imagine anything harder. So my heart goes out to anyone going through that. So, questions or comments? Yeah.
She was responding to Bernice's question, and her suggestion was that play therapy is a really useful thing for children going through a traumatic thing like that. And also reading a book about someone else going through a similar experience, but it's someone else, not necessarily on, helps them try to understand that. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Anything? No? Do you want to play one last? Sure. Robert will play one last piece, and then we'll be up. We're going to stay up here. We're happy to visit with anyone. We have CDs and note cards for sale. I'm doing workshops in my studio this summer, day-long workshops, expanding on these ideas that Robert and I talked about today, this idea of the transformative and healing power of creativity, and it's for artists or non-artists alike. There's a sign-up sheet if you want to be on the email list for that. And we'll do one last piece and then come up and visit. Yes.
Do you see different effects people you're playing for, depending on whether you're playing major or minor?
The question is, if I play something in a major or a minor key, do I see different effects? I'm hugely sensitive to, if I'm kind of sitting there going, that might be a bit of a downer. But if I'm playing something like, people tend to, the major keys tend to make people more.
So your answer is that you really hardly ever play minor keys?
Sometimes I do. Sometimes it's appropriate. I spend a lot of time in hospice situations, and sometimes music, beautiful music, that kind of opens that up. I was in a room last week at the hospital, and there was a fellow who was about to die, and he was Navajo, and his family was there, and they wanted me to play some music that was appropriate. So. Something like that, which was actually written by a composer for a friend who had just died. It gave the family a chance to kind of to channel some of the grief that they were feeling and have an outlet. So it's appropriate at times. It's finesse. It's all about kind of knowing what to do in the moment there.
Which makes me wonder, if you catch each other in this destructive mind pattern, do you have a way to help each other come out of it?
This is a really good question. Bernice is asking, she said, if we catch each other in this destructive mind pattern, because we always have that choice, and it's always one or the other. It's either destructive or it's constructive. I mean, I'm a pragmatist. It's like, do we have a way of helping each other? Okay, I'll be totally honest here. What Robert says to me is, Rebecca, you talk about this all the time, and now you're not doing it. You're not being in the moment. You're not being, and it's kind of like, and initially I get a little irritated, it's like, but then I'm like, he's right. Our minds, for some reason, it's easier for us to go to that destructive place. And anything that can help snap us out of it and go, okay. Because the ego wants to hold on to that for some reason. He's much more difficult to snap out. I'm just being honest. Because he feels like I'm telling him what to do. So I haven't quite figured out that piece yet. Would you agree or disagree?
I come from a long line of depressive people, so I totally understand that. But one of the things that I'm working on real hard now is to develop a practice of doing things that lessen the highs and the lows accordingly. And so it's more stuff happening outside of me rather than stuff happening inside of me. And for us, as self-employed artists in an economy that has been, shall we say, difficult, to say the least, there's a lot of challenges out there. And learning what's outside of us, learning what we can't affect at all, and learning that, wow, I put a hummingbird feeder out yesterday. Cool. There's going to be a hummingbird one of these days. Looking at the things that are truly important, that's really a good thing to do. And I would say that exercise is hugely important for me. Your body is this place where if you put junk food in it, it's going to respond accordingly to that. So have something meditative. Take a time out every day. This is especially important for caretakers. Go out, get out in the garden, take a walk, You know, spend some time with a dog, with a child. Learn to appreciate the little things that are going on. Also, here's an important thing. Turn off the TV. Just you know, don't watch the news. Just seriously, we stopped getting cable. My friend Larry Dossie.
Did you say something about ping pong?
What I say? Gnick gnock, gnick gnock, gnick gnock. Rebecca and I, both in the last few years, have gotten to be real serious aficionados of, in Rebecca's case, dance. She's taking all kinds of dance classes in classical ballet, in modern dance. It's quite wonderful what she's doing. Jazz dance. It's really cool, and I'm very proud of her for doing that. And I started playing ping pong, like serious ping pong, going to the nationals and stuff like that. And the week after next, I've got to go and be at Ball State University. Then after I get done there, my coach, who was the U.S. Olympic coach, is going to be doing a 2-day thing in Indianapolis. So it'll be 2 days of 6 hours a day of smacking balls. So it kind of gets, if you have something like that, thanks for bringing that up, Larry, that gets you out of your head, find something like that that you can do. I think that that's really, really important stuff. And I'm way too intense. And Rebecca, I mean, at this point, it is 25 to life for us. But it's a wonder how she's put up with this kind of intensity with me, because I can really get stressed out.
And I wasn't complaining about Robert, but I think you bring up a really important thing, Bernice, that I think that's something we can ask people in our lives to help us with, because our pattern is, and everything, not everything, but a lot of things in our culture encourage us to go to the destructive. I mean, even our leaders these days, they're telling us all the ways we're disconnected from everyone in the world. Well, I can tell you that every single person on this planet experiences joy and pain in exactly the same way. So don't tell me we're disconnected. No matter what religion, politics, economics, we have this intense connection with every being on this planet. And asking for help from people we love, having some kind of language where you know, someone can say nicely. And it's a hard thing to say because we're very attached to that destructive thinking. When you really start, and you know, one of the exercises that I've been doing is just being aware of how many times I'm having these conversations in my mind that I think are going to happen with Robert or somebody else out there in the world. Usually they're difficult conversations, and then recognizing how many times those conversations actually ever happen. You know what? They never happen. I just want to finish that thought. So that's like wasted energy. Wasted energy. When something was happening in the moment that we missed because we were having that conversation that never happened. It's not real. And so any way that we can help each other with that is a huge gift of love. And I just wanted to say one other thing that I didn't say tonight that I think is so important when we're being challenged physically. Because, and Bernice, you may have experienced this. Bernice and I have the same oncologist. We have had a very similar diagnosis, very similar treatment and history. And because that, when people get a diagnosis, when women get a diagnosis, I have a lot of people who call me and want to have questions. Well, what's going to happen with chemo, and what am I going to feel like, and will you go with me? And a lot of fear. It's a very scary thing. And always this question, either directly or indirectly, can I do this? Can I do this? And what I always say to people is I never say it's going to be okay. Because I found that that really was not helpful to me, because I didn't feel okay. And everybody has a different definition of what okay is. But what I do say is, I know you can handle this. And that seems to give people a sense of peace about it. Because we can handle anything in the moment. It's all those imagined things in the future that we can't handle. But when we get to them, and that's why, you know, you hear all these stories about, you know, people being able to lift the car off, you know, all that stuff. It's because in that moment, we are capable of things that we never knew we were capable of. Our mind can't comprehend it. Our mind only knows what it's seen or heard. But that unconscious, intuitive part of ourselves is an endless expansion. And so in each moment, we can handle anything.
One of my favorite playwrights, maybe the best American living playwright, is a guy named David Mamet. And in one of his pieces, he has a character say, "Worry is interest paid in advance on a debt that may never come due." I'll say that again. Worry is interest paid in advance on a debt that may never come due. And I think that sometimes that's so hard because the reality of, oh, this is going to happen, that comes around. But if you can put it in some kind of perspective, well, maybe it isn't. And maybe when it comes around, then I can deal with it. But for right now, right here, you remember Wayne's World? Remember Garth? Be in the now. He was right. Aldous Huxley said the same thing, but I think Garth actually said it more effectively.
Another, I think, more helpful thing is, personally, sorry.
Wayne's party time.
When you feel yourself getting in that kind of worry or fear or all those anxiety is a big problem for a lot of us. I mean, I have a family history of anxiety. One little trick is just ask yourself, what is my problem right now? Right this minute, what is my problem right now? Can I improve it? Can I remove it? Am I in a situation I don't want to be in? Can I change it? Or if I can't do any of those things, how can I just accept it? And you know, the vast majority of time when we're in that state and you go, what is my problem right now? We actually don't have a problem right now. That's what's weird. You know, that those problems get expanded. So just little ways that we can kind of remind ourselves, what is my problem right now? Okay, you identify a problem. Can I improve it? Can I remove it? Can I change it? Or can I find a way to accept it so I can give myself some relief? Because that anxiety, stress, fear, all of those things, part of human nature, part of who we are, when they get out of control, they rob us of the joy of being alive and being able to give to each other, which is what ultimately we all want to do. Connection is what means something to us. When it comes down to, you know, you're laying there, that's what means something, is connection. None of this other stuff, really. It's not. It's a game we play. We have to do something. But connection's what means something. How can we connect rather than disconnect?
The elegant way that Tom Wolfe put it is we have to be high grammarians of the present tense. Okay. High grammarians.
Yeah, I never
to
know
conjugate
what that means either.
the present tense. We have to not think about the future. We have to not think about the past. Just be in the present tense right now. Yeah. Yes, Bernice.
Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. That's wonderful.
I find that book actually very useful. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The Power of Now, it's called. Just a kind of very pragmatic book about just little exercises to be present.
Rebecca, there's such a beautiful, subtle shift in your work, and my question is, do you already see it when you sit down in the room? Because I'm watching you work like this, yet do you already see it as it's finished product, or does it evolve? Because you certainly can't sit down and do it in one sitting, and I mean, thousands of hours to into this. So does it evolve as you do, or is there any relationship to your color changes, and maybe your moods, or how much time you set the loom? You kind of know, it's time to get away, step away and do something else, because there's just such beautiful transitions in your work.
Yeah, Mark's asking about the transitions in my work and how does that evolve? Do I see it? Because when you're weaving, you may have noticed in the video, I am only seeing about 10 inches of the piece at a time, and then it gets rolled around on the loom. So am I seeing like the whole piece and then working on it minutely, or is it evolving as I go along? The vast majority of time, I see the piece. And in fact, I just do scale pencil drawings. And Robert, bless his heart, he's just such a wonderful supporter of everything that I've done. I'll sometimes...
You got that on film? Okay, I'll want that, please.
Sometimes I'll take these pencil drawings to him and I'll say, what do you think of this piece? And of course, in my mind, I'm seeing the color and everything. And he's like, well, I can't really tell what that looks like. So I do see the whole piece. I see the world in terms of color. But just recently, I was working on a piece that I thought I saw the whole piece, and then I got part of the way into it and I thought, I think I'm going to do this. And it took me in this whole new direction. So I have to now kind of go back, because we have this tendency, we do things over and over, and then we make rules for ourselves. And then we forget that we're the ones who made the rules, right? Yeah, a lot of those rules we think we're living by, we made them up, and we can just unmake them. So now I have to look at, oh, maybe I need to pay more attention. I'm not aware of a relationship with color in terms of mood that I'm in. Even though color definitely affects people's moods, I have this kind of, I respond to every color, and I don't have a lot of verbiage that goes along with the colors. A lot of people do, you know, but I don't. I just love color, and I just love that immersion in color. But that's a really good question.
The interesting thing is that Beethoven said the guitar is a miniature orchestra in itself. So for me, we've been going in the same direction, because for me it's all about tone color on the guitar. So we're actually aiming towards the same thing, because otherwise if I play in the same place, it sounds like piano, just left hand. And that's just not taking advantage of what the guitar can do. So we've been looking at this idea of color, and I find myself now at 43 even more interested in the guitar. Wow, you people are pretty good.
You're gonna let him get away with that?
Yeah.
You're just being nice to dog ears.
Yeah. No more Cubans for you. Now, I find myself at 64 more interested in the guitar than I ever have been. There's an Italian proverb about working at your avocation is half praying. And that's why that whole idea of creativity, of inquiring within, it's what Aristotle, the Greeks were talking about, this kind of seed that's within us that is who we truly are. And that should be our life's work, is to find out what it is we're here to do.
And just because other people can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah.
I've been remiss. I want to thank the Los Alamos Council on Cancer for making this evening possible, and for all the amazing work that you do in the community.
Yeah, this is great stuff. And my brother Mark. So thank you all. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.